Hello and welcome back to another episode of Nick Tiffany's Movie Reviews in the podcast form. We got a weird one for you today. Beau is Afraid. This is the third film written and directed by Ari Aster, who kind of, in the last 5 or so years, has really kind of cemented himself as a unique, twisted, and kind of horrific new voice in the world of movies. Aster came onto the scene with his first film, Hereditary, which had Toni Collette just brilliantly acting in this demonic possessed role, this creature that acts throughout her and is trying to exact some justice on her family. Just spooky stuff. And then in 2019, really divided audiences with Midsommar, with Florence Pugh. A film that, for as beautiful as it looked, is just full of horrific imagery. Whether it's under the guise of old religious tales or old religious ways, both of his films deal with a lot of grief and tragedy, and exploring how different characters respond to that, how that kind of changes and shapes your character going forward. And often all of our characters are in pretty effed up scenarios to begin with. Not that they've already dealt with a lot, and then there's just more that's thrown on top of them. And, anything from you see someone slowly sawing someone's head off, there's just, someone loses their head on passing by a post with their head out the window. There's just, there's some screwed up stuff in these movies. But there is also some brilliance in his storytelling, and just how deeply invigorating some of it is. He really has proved himself to be one of the better standout voices, especially that we've gotten from A24. So Beau is Afraid is probably his largest departure from his first two movies. It still has an air of horror in the background, but it is much more of a quirky, dramatic comedy almost than it is anything else. Beau, played by Joaquin Phoenix, is severe, he's dealing with severe anxiety. And we're not even talking, this isn't just like, COVID happened and he doesn't want to go outside, or you're really worried, or, I know there's, I saw that movie Kimmy that they made during COVID, and, she kind of deals with a lot of that anxiety of going out. But Beau's is just next level. Anything he might do, he just questions everything. Everything scares the shit out of him. And Joaquin Phoenix, if you're going to go to anybody with an acting challenge, I mean, he's your guy. He is just one of the most versatile and dedicated actors I think that we've ever had. And every project he does, he's just fascinating. So with Beau, I mean, I was getting extremely anxious kind of watching him, and just how much his skin was crawling and his indecision, and okay, maybe I will do this, but of course if he's going to do something, he completely fucks it up, and it's just, you're left to think oh no, this is going to happen and this will lead to this, and you can kind of get a glimpse of his process, I guess. And when I say this movie is dramatic comedy with a hint of horror, it kind of starts out, the whole idea behind the movie is that Beau's mom, Mona, played by Patti LuPone, she's just phenomenal in this movie. It's clear that there is a really weird dynamic between the mother-son duo, whether it's hints of Oedipal ongoings, or just the fact that, she's one of those moms that, I feel like more and more we're hearing stories or seeing stories of some of these just really abusive, whether it's verbally or, there's not really much physical abuse in that sense for the story. But, just this idea of, the most important person in his world constantly making him second guess his choices, with quotes like, oh, well, if you really loved me, you would show up here, but I understand if you feel you need to do something else. And of course, he's just saying, what should I do, Mom? I don't, well, maybe I can make it, but I might have to do this. And she, no, honey, it's fine. It's fine. I'm sure you're going to do whatever you want to do. And if you don't want to come see your mother, the only woman that's ever loved you and the only woman that's ever taken care of you, and well, that's fine. Then I have to go. And this just drives him crazy because weirdly, she is one of the only forms of support that he has. Getting him, we kind of learn through the start of the film, he's in deep therapy conversations, just trying to work past a lot of these issues and anxieties. And you kind of learn that Beau is now on his own, kind of fought to get out from his mother's grasp. But now he's got to get back to her place. And the whole movie kind of revolves around his journey, trying to see his mother so as not to disappoint her. And as is the case with so many of these odd journey stories, he's going to come across legitimately crazy people on his way, trying to make it from state to state even. Amy Ryan and Nathan Lane play a couple who at some point in the story are kind of assisting Beau. It's clear, he's taking so much medication. He's doing all these things. He is not a fully functioning adult, I would say. And they're kind of here to help take care of him. They lost a son in the war, and so they're overly ready to help and have someone in their home. But it's like, well, no, I'm happy to be here and for the help, but can you take me to my mom's, please? It's like, oh, we'll get around to it, but first you need to get back up to strength. All these impossible tasks are kind of being placed in front of him, and a lot of them are genuinely really funny. They're kind of like, they're funny in a fucked up kind of way, I would say, truthfully. Whether it's anxiousness about, some of these homeless people, or, some of these street vandalists, or they're these street vandals, or these, there's a guy who's just continually staring at him up in his building. And of course the guy's got like the black contacts and neck tattoos and tongue piercings, and just looks like, in the movie, it's like, oh, like this guy's gonna like freaking kill me if I take a step outside. So I don't know if that's worth it. But the way they kind of play around with some of these these expectations is pretty humorous. And at times it's also horrifying. Like there's genuinely so many moments that are just like, okay, I'm like, we're there breathing with Beau, like, okay, you just got to make it across the street. You just got to get across the street. 3, 2, 1, run. Don't look behind you. Don't look around. And just, for a 3-hour movie, mind you, the pacing is actually pretty great. It's slow and terrifying in moments that it needs to, until it ramps up and just hits you in the face like a train, and you're like, no, we're chugging and we're moving 1,000,000 miles a minute here. And it just, the story is very unique, and I've seen a lot of people on Twitter especially, not that they're comparing it to Damien Chazelle's Babylon, but the idea that it is kind of nice that you can have newer directors making these 2.5, 3-hour epic, weird, not totally Hollywood stories, or, not something that, just, I don't know what studio saw the pitch, all the crazy mommy issues and all, and was like, yeah, you know what, let's do it. 3 hours, you got it. But it just, it speaks, I think, to the confidence they have in Ari Aster as a storyteller, in his following, as far as people who just, recognize a really unique cinematic voice. And I don't know. I'd be interested to just see this film on the page, on the script, and see how it reads versus how it plays. Because there were so many moments where I was like, I know I shouldn't be laughing right now, but they've touched a weirdly dark comical vein, and they're gonna keep exploiting it here and there. And then there's also, just as is kind of the case of his movies, some really weird iconography and just odd commercial placements. All sort of stuff that in the end you kind of do see does serve the larger story. But I don't know. This was one, I saw it with a room of probably like 8 or 9 people. Nobody left the movie. Like, some people on Twitter were like, I've had so many people walk out of this movie. It was horrific. I don't think people necessarily knew what they were getting into going into it. I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's a Joaquin Phoenix movie, and, it looks kind of interesting. Nathan Lane's in it. Patti LuPone's in the movie. It's got to be great. It's got to be interesting, and I think everyone was kind of like, what the couples in front of me or the people moving around, they're like, I'm uncomfortable, but I'm also like really entertained right now, and I don't know what we're watching. And after the movie, everyone's reactions, everyone kind of chuckling, looking around at each other like, what did we just watch? That was crazy. It was absolutely crazy, but it was good. And, to be honest, if I hadn't been, I was down in Los Angeles last weekend for the SnyderCon, Snyderverse 3-day screening of Man of Steel, Batman, Superman, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I went and saw Beau's Afraid before I'd gone down. And I was like, okay, if I've got time, I'll do it on the weekend in this review. But, that definitely didn't end up happening. And I will be doing an entire segment kind of based around that weekend and talking about Justice League and Zack Snyder and meeting him and all that stuff. But, I've had almost a week to kind of process this movie now. And I just want to go see it again. And, I would honestly advise people, if there's the big popcorn movie, if you can wait. Take your chance on something a little more, I don't necessarily want to call it independent, but, just take a chance on something different. Because I think, why we go see the movies sometimes is to be surprised. And, I talked about it in my last review with Ant-Man and Marvel and DC movies at this point. I think people are just kind of, their expectations, I don't know if they're just getting lower and lower and they're still not being met, or we're just doing the bare minimum for Hollywood these days. But I think audiences are hungry for something different. Even if it's not, a 5 out of 5 film, even if there are some issues or things that might not play as well as they'd hoped. I think for the conversation alone and for just the sheer surprise of it all, you absolutely have to go see Beau is Afraid. It's in limited release right now, so it's not going to be in theaters much longer. I would go see this in a theater if you can and you have the time. I think it's going to play a lot better that way. I think a 3-hour movie at home, while still doable, it's just too easy to get distracted sometimes. And this is definitely a story that deserves your entire your captivation. I mean, it's just wacky. And Joaquin Phoenix, bless his heart, this man is a treasure. I'm, more excited for Joker 2 than anything now. And, everything this man touches is just phenomenal. Gladiator, the guy, he could play any genre and he just brings 110% of his effort into the project. And that really just, again, it helps sell so much more of the story when he's freaking out like you probably would be. So, I think if you need something new, if you've already been yearning for a night at the movies, go see Beau is Afraid. And if you're interested in that, if you liked it, if there are ideas in there that you enjoyed, maybe you go back and check out Hereditary or Midsommar. But just go in knowing that, comparatively, even though there's some kind of fucked up imagery in this movie, it's nothing compared to his previous 2 films. So for that, this certainly is his most accessible work. But yeah, I'm going to have to go see this again before it leaves theaters, and then still watch it one more time at home before I really dive deep into the Reddit threads. But so should you. Thanks for listening, guys. And hopefully the next one's just as crazy as this one. Take care.